Good morning. My name is James, um, and I wanted to show you something interesting that I found. I haven't uploaded very many videos of this type to YouTube before, so I'm going to do my best to not ramble and drag it on. I have recorded this once before, and it ended up being almost 2 hours, and that is too fucking long. Too much. Um, so I'm going to try and not get quite as lost in the weeds this time. However, this is a very interesting thing that I found, and it wasn't hidden or anything. This is posted on the U.S. Census Bureau's website. These are projections of the population of the United States from 1975 to 2050. It's a report that was issued in October of 1975 by the U.S. Department of Commerce, Bureau of the Census. This is real shit. And I'm going to show you that in a lot of ways, they were pretty good about it. Really good guesses. The thing that struck me when I first saw it was that they had predicted that in 2025 the population of the United States would be 348 million people. And in 2025, in reality, the population of the United States was 341 million people, which I went, that's pretty fucking close. That's really good. Great guess. And so I started reading this, and not a great guess. In reality, the number was good, but how we got there is not at all what they predict. They don't. Um, well, let's get into it. I'm going to start just by reading some of the introduction and going through what these predictions are. They make three series of predictions, basically. And they are based primarily on fertility rates. Let's just start. This report presents projections of the population of the United States by age and sex and of the components of population change, births, deaths, and net immigration. So they say this, but they later in the introduction say basically we can't account for deaths. Deaths are they're pretty steady, and hard to predict for. And they don't really account for net immigration at all. They assume that immigration will stay roughly at the level that it was in 1975, which it hasn't. And so all of these guesses are off because of that. And that was the sticking point. This is really a video about immigration. And what it's doing to us, I suppose. So there's three main projections presented in this report. They assume a slight reduction in future mortality, not a big change, and an annual net migration of 400,000 per year, and they just leave it at that. They differ only in their assumptions about future fertility. In 1975, let's see, is it this one? Fertility rates had been dropping. This is average births per woman, basically, which is how we measure fertility. And in 1960, 3.65, it had come down from the 1920s or whatever, where it was like 7 or some shit. And in 1975, it was down to 1.77. And people had been seeing this trend, statisticians, I suppose, who were doing this. And so they were predicting they were making their predictions based on whether or not that fertility rate would recover and go up, sort of level out in the future, or go down, continue to fall. And so the three different series are based on that, basically. These are just outlaying what the previous projections looked like. Um, yeah, I'm trying to decide what to skip. There's 3 other projections in Series 2 that they make, with slight modifications because they think Series 2 is the most likely, because it's just in the middle. Whether women have children later, 2 years later, setting the age to 28 instead of 26. Whether they have more kids. I don't know what this one means. If I'm honest, I'm not the brightest person, but average cohort fertility will vary inversely with the size of a birth cohort before converging in the long run to a level slightly below replacement. And then Series 2X assumes no net immigration and illustrates a simple, unrealistic approach to zero population growth. Basically, the birth cohort is how many women there are in any given year that could produce children. I guess this is they have less children if there's more women, which isn't how it works, I don't think. And I think they say that's not how it works. They are using inflation deflation variants of the standard cohort component method, which I think is just how you get 3 series. You pick a series that's higher and a series that's lower, and that's inflation deflation. In July 1st, 1974, the population of the United States, including armed forces overseas, was about 212 million and had decreased by 0.7% during the preceding year. They had lived through the baby boom, so populations went up, and then by 1975, they had started declining again. Not like the net population, but the growth had started declining. So in the 1950s, it had peaked at 1.7%, and by 1975, it was back down to 0.7, basically. They also suggest that it's difficult to predict fertility based on a number of things, socioeconomic factors, and just like societal norms. People change. However, they don't think that it will be dropping to below 2. They think it's unlikely. These are their estimated projections for population. Just raw numbers based on each series. And basically, 2025 in Series 1, 382. Sorry, I'm getting lost. I'm confusing myself. But let's just keep going. So these are their 3 series. Basically, Series 1, more fertility. Series 2, less for average fertility. Series 3, less fertility. I'm getting lost in my thoughts trying to plan what I'm saying. So higher, middle, lower. And basically that's all it is. That's all the predictions are. And we're going to find that Series 1 is most accurate to our actual population, and Series 3 is most accurate to our expected population, or our expected fertility, basically. How much of this do I want to read? Recent trends in annual fertility. This is interesting. Trends in annual fertility in the United States have received less attention from demographers than trends in cohort fertility, though annual trends are important in social and economic planning and in market research. The post-1970 decline in annual fertility has received considerable attention in the news media, along with attempts to identify the factors underlying the decline. In 1970, it was a fairly recent event that women started entering the workforce. And the authors of this report suggest that marriage doesn't matter so much, but The decline appears to reflect both a postponement of fertility and a decline in lifetime fertility among women now in the young childbearing ages, who are going off to work instead of having family. Which is kind of interesting. I don't know whether that's true, but, well, let's look at this again. This is what our fertility rates are like. And they also say that probably more women being in the workforce increased unemployment numbers, which increases economic hardship on people and makes them less likely to have children in addition. There's just more workers, and so less value to human capital, which is sort of a theme. They also go on to say that they don't really account for. So in the introduction, they say black people, black Americans are in general younger than white Americans in 1975, and I think still today, because that's just the way higher fertility works. And so because they're younger, they're going to have higher fertility rates, but they expect that evens out. And I think it does even out, basically. I think those projections are normal and make sense. The way that they... Reading through the introduction, I think that they are basing their projections on very reasonable measures, and that's why they get close in a lot of ways. But it's hard to... They make no accounting for immigration at all, and so their numbers are off by a lot in the end, in reality. Estimates and projections of the population by age from 1950 to 2000. I think by age, not really interesting to me for most of this. There's interesting things that they predict and get wrong based on the ages and based on fertility rates. Later on, they have another chart like this, but basically they predict a median age of by 2025, 30.9 is what they predict the median age to be. Here's what the median ages are. And it passed 30.9 5 years after that. So the population is getting older rapidly. Median age is 39.4 in 2025, according to Google's AI, which, forgive me, I just Googled it. And so there's other things that they talk about that are pretty interesting. The birth rate, they get pretty close in Series 3 to what our birth rate is now and remains, 1.7. The birth rates they choose for the other ones are 2.7 and 1.9, I think. If I had read the introduction, I'd be able to say for sure. A lot of these charts are pretty interesting, but not that useful to this video, I suppose. The black population is projected to grow at a higher rate than the white population because the black population has a younger age structure. But they say it'll even out, basically. Let's see. Sorry. Series 3 assumes 1.7. Series 2... All right, you know what? I'm getting lost in the weeds again. Let's just carry on. They project sex ratios by age, which 65 years and over, a lot more women than men, which is normal and makes sense. They're not wrong. I don't think. I guess I could look. They might be wrong by this much, if it's this much, but probably not. Um, so, and the attempt was made here to select reasonable assumptions about the future course of components of population, but they basically don't account for immigration at all. Which I think it says here or slightly later. 26. The population projections presented here are based on the general assumption that there will be no large-scale war, widespread epidemic, or other major catastrophe. While future levels of mortality and net immigration cannot be predicted exactly, changes in these two components are likely to have much less impact than changes in fertility on the size and composition of future population. Not true. It turns out that that's not true, because we've had much more immigration than they expected, basically. They talk about their methodology, which I think is good. I'm not an expert, but I think it's good. If somebody can tell me I'm stupid, please, God. They give an example here of young black men, basically, what their populations are looking like. As, you know, they break it down into every little group in the 80 pages of charts in this report, basically. These are the assumptions they're making about cohort fertility rates, how many women are having children. This is, they get into the specifics about series 1, 2, and 3. On page 22, series 3 assumes 1.7 births per woman, which is here somewhere. I don't know. I'm just trying to burn by it because I spent way too long talking about all of this last time. Current mortality rates are higher for blacks than for whites. It's assumed that the ultimate mortality rates by race will be identical. They think, it'll just even out, which, I'm not sure if it does or not, but it's either this or close to this or closer to identical, right? As noted in the introductory section, all projection series except Series 2X assume a net immigration of 400,000 per year. The figure is close to the current annual level of alien immigration into the United States and to the average annual net civilian immigration into the United States during the past decade. Because of the lack of reliable information, recent estimates of net immigration do not include an allowance either for aliens entering the United States illegally or for immigrants leaving the United States. So they don't make any assumptions about illegal immigration at all, which there's a lot of. And there has continued to be a lot of. I don't know how bad that was in 1975, based on how bad it is now. I assume not as bad. All right. So let's just get to some of these other charts. Series 2R and things, figures in this are rounded. They're not trying to go down to the single digits, These are all in thousands. Some of them are in millions. Annual estimates of population and the components of population change by race. So these are the real numbers from 1940 to 1975 for everybody, white, black, and other races, which they include together because other races account for so little, and then just black, which you'll see in 1975, 23 million blacks, 26.8 million black and other races, which means 3 million other races, basically. Which is 1.5 to 2% of 212 million. Just an indication of where we're at in 1975, which is this, right? And then these are population projections from 1974 to 2050 in Series 1, and then they'll do Series 2 and 3. And by 2025, 378 million in Series 1. By 2025 in Series 2, the same chart, 298 million. And in Series 3, 2025, 250 million. And basically in Series 3, because of the birth rates, 2025, really 2020, I guess, they expect that the population of the United States will start going down because of the low fertility. Here it sort of levels out. Here it doesn't level out because fertility has gone straight up. Not straight up, high. And in all of these charts, you'll notice net immigration, this column here, 400,000, all the way down. They make no accounting for anything else, basically, as far as immigration goes. They have these same charts for the white population, Negro, and other races. And interestingly, they're pretty accurate about these numbers. At least as far as whites and blacks are concerned, they're pretty accurate. Which is part of the interesting part. The ages, I don't think are really relevant. I imagine there's some interesting things to be learned about really the ages of the immigrant population that's come to the United States based on probably this data. But not that interesting. Let's see. All right, we're going to kind of burn through these. This is the charts have started, basically. And there's a lot of interesting numbers in these charts. Fertility rates and things. They predict that because of the reduced birth rates and all that, populations will cap out at certain points, making no accounting for immigration above 400,000. Basically, they think that the cap will be in Series 3, 250 million, basically. And in 2025, we have 341 million. In Series... I'm trying to go through it too fast, and I'm losing track of the things I want to say. Let's get down to page 119. All right. This is the one that predicts median ages, basically. And you'll see that overall, between 2000 and 2050, they think it's going to roughly stay the same, basically. And it doesn't. It goes up. We're at 39 now. It goes up by a lot. 122's predicted fertility. This is total female estimates and projections of cumulative fertility by age and of completed fertility. Basically, this is where they are predicting that the age of women will get up to 26. Basically, is the average age. And so all these numbers are sort of just evening out to 26. These numbers are the fertility rate in previous series or in previous years. They were at 2.5, 2.3, 2.4, 2.7. Series 1, they predicted to even out at 2.7. Series 2, 2.1. Series 3, 1.7, which is closest to where we are now. I've written down on page 130, they have projected survival rates, which is kind of interesting. I'm not sure what you could learn from this or how we could compare this to what's happening now. But kind of interesting. How many people are going to die? That's how they're predicting how many people are going to pass away based on their ages and races and all of that. 134 is the assumed distribution of future annual net immigration by age, sex, and race. This is how they are saying that the 400,000 immigrants are going to, what they are going to be, basically. They say 212,000 female, 187,000 male, so slightly more women than men, which is just how population works, basically. Not weird. However, the interesting part of this is that they predict 250,000 of those 400,000 every year will be white Europeans. Because before 1975, that is who most of the immigrants coming to the country were. They predict 41,000 black immigrants and then 100,000 basically other races immigrants per year, which are small numbers, very small numbers. I think in 1975, they probably expected white European immigrants to integrate into the society well. But we didn't end up getting 400,000 immigrants a year, and we didn't end up getting, that many white immigrants either. I guess let me start going through these, because the conclusions that I drew from this are a combination of these predictions that they make, and other sources, right? So let's see. Shit. Trying to move quickly and skipping through a bunch of shit, and it's still been a half hour. All right. Basically, our population in the United States, these series predict in series 1, in series 3, they predict by 2025 250 million. We're at 341 million. In series 2, they predict by 2025 297 million. And in series 3, by 2025, they predict 378 million. It's Yeah, and we're not there. We're at 341. Um, these are the actual immigration stats, basically. Our net migration starting in 75, basically. It wasn't 400,000 then. It was almost 700,000, and it had been above that for the previous 5 years, basically. They chose their cap at 400K, which is almost the absolute lowest number on this chart. So they were double that in the years previous. So maybe that is not the best number to have picked. However, starting in 1990, you can see that instead of 400,000, we had a million, 1.2, 1.3, 1.3, 1.7, 1.9, basically, for decades. We've had millions and millions of people coming in. You can see that in 1975, 215 million people, 85% white, 12% black. Everybody else makes up that remaining little bit. In the year 2000, 281 million Americans, and already by then, 75% white, still 12% black. But now there's millions of Asians and millions of Hispanics. 35 million Hispanics have come in the last 25 years in 2000, who weren't here previously. If they were here previously, the census would have considered them. They would have broken them out into their own section instead of including them as black and other races. Which is, it's hard to imagine how wrong you have to be for on the immigration for that, right? The predictions they're making are based on fertility. They're ending up with similar numbers to what we end up with in reality, except that instead of birth rates, it's all increased. The population is all increased by immigration. And in 2025, 340 million. Less than 60% white. This isn't a white replacement video, but it's been 50 years. And 20% of our population is people who weren't here 50 years ago. 27%, maybe 30%, depending on how you are looking at it. Oh, that's our fertility. Here's our actual immigration count up through 2015. By 2015, it was at 47 million. These are first generation migrants, basically. In 2025, I believe it's 50 million, something like that, and 90 million 90 million non-whites, non-blacks, let's say. Which is 90 million people who wouldn't have been here, right? And it's hard to consider the results of that, I guess. The report was really interesting because they predict similar demographics to what they have then going to the future and just adjusting by fertility, but they have no conception of what's going to happen, right, in the future. The fact that millions and millions and millions of foreign people are let into the country, they can make no predictions about that because they don't think it's going to happen. Because people don't want it to happen, basically. These are Gallup's polls from the from all of their immigration related polls, basically from whenever they started doing it. They have data from 1965 on these charts. Most of their questions are more recent, but this one, should immigration be decreased, kept at its present level, or increased? And up through 1995, which, as a reminder, in 1990 they started letting in 1 million immigrants a year. Um, the most people in the country thought decrease it or keep it the same, right? And more people thought decrease it, basically, and still do up until today. 55% of the country wanted immigration decreased in 2024. And yet, this is a majority in a lot of these questions through the 90s and 2000s and the 80s and the 70s, easily with the keep it at its present level. Um, Most people don't want the immigration that we got. For some reason, despite most Americans not wanting it, this happened. What is this? How did this happen to us? And who did it? It's really strange. Um, these numbers are basically this chart. In 1995, we see it go down. My assumption is that Gallup doesn't make any accounting for who they're actually asking these questions to, right? They're not targeting just native born Americans. They're just asking people. They're just making phone calls, probably trying to get, you know, really whoever is living here, which is, I think, the right thing for them to be doing. However, starting here, the people who are living here are not the same people. And so these numbers, I think the reason it looks like this is because we're pulling millions of foreigners as well. And of course, obviously, the millions of foreigners in the country want their friends and family to come. Um, and I want to be clear that I don't hold this personally against anybody. Um, I would hold it personally against the politicians who were making these policy decisions in 1990 or 1975 or whatever. But the immigrants that are coming here are looking for a better life. And they're coming, most of them are coming from places that are significantly worse than the United States. And I cannot fault them at all for wanting to go someplace better, someplace safer, and someplace more prosperous, and someplace that's radically accepting of other people, basically. People in the United States are incredibly sympathetic, and in some of these polls, even the people who want decreased immigration um, are sympathetic to the individual immigrants, right? Most people will say, yeah, well, we don't want them here, but, I feel bad for them, right? Um, how much do you personally worry about illegal immigration? A great deal. A lot of people, a third of the country, more than a third for the last 25 years, have said a great deal. And a significant amount say fair amount, right? This is more than half, almost every year. Say, we're worried about this. And yet, we've had 35 years of millions and millions and millions of people coming in. How many people are satisfied with the level of immigration? By 2000, of course, we had whatever 20% of people were in 2000 first generation immigrants. And, yeah, they're satisfied. They're happy that they got to come, I guess. How many people, or sorry, would you like to see the level of immigration increase, decrease, or remain the same of those dissatisfied with the level of immigration? You know, do you think immigration is a good thing or a bad thing? Most people still think it's good, but I don't think most people realize how many people are coming. The people in the year 2000 don't realize quite how bad it was, right? In 10 years, they'd had gained, you know, 15 million people. Who would know? Um, do you favor deporting immigrants? All immigrants. And most people don't want to send everybody back. Americans are sympathetic, they appreciate foreign cultures, and they don't want to see their friends forced out. So that's what this is. But they still don't want more, right? They're still asking for the immigration to be decreased. Would you like to expand the construction of walls along the border? This is from 2025, 2019, 2018. This is a lot of people. It's not the majority here because at this point, we've got 80 million immigrants in the country, 60 million of which are Hispanic. And so, you know, the polls, maybe it makes me stupid, but I would love to see who we're asking here. You know what I mean? Um, Clearly, Hispanic adults are strongly in favor of immigrants living in the U.S. illegally becoming U.S. citizens, right? More national adults oppose that. But the whole thing is painful. And there's no accounting in any of this for how many illegals there are, right? In 2025, we were supposed to have had 11 to 14 million or whatever. 11 million, I think, in 2018, something like that. And here's the story: Yale finds twice as many undocumented immigrants as previous estimates. Right? In they think 11.3 million is the official number, and Yale thinks it might be 22. Which, going back over all of this, has it been double the entire time? Not these numbers. These are legal, I assume. Maybe including illegal, I guess. But we don't know the extent of the illegal immigration. 53.3 million foreign-born first-generation immigrants, basically, in the United States in 2025. These people account for 25%, 30% of our population, and none of them lived here 50 years ago. I guess. I don't know. Um, it's 90 million extra people in the United States. And I guess just like at the start of the um, report, they suggest that adding women to the workplace, in addition to lowering fertility, um, increase unemployment. I think from 6 to 9% in 1975, something like that is in that report. Um, but in the intervening 50 years, we've added 90 million non-native people to our population who need to have jobs, right? 30 million immigrant workers in the United States. Why? 50% of immigrant headed households utilized at least one major welfare program. Why? We've had 90 million people show up in the last 50 years, and we're supporting half of them with welfare. This was an incredibly interesting story that was posted by Muckraker, which I had never heard of before. I don't use Twitter very much. Um, about Dominican immigrants sending their SNAP EBT benefits, food purchased with their EBT benefits, back to Santo Domingo so that their families can sell it in their shops.
Behind me is the Port Newark Container Terminal, and it is from here that tens of thousands of pounds of food, what likely amounts to millions of dollars of food, that has been paid for by you, the American taxpayer, is being shipped to the Dominican Republic.
This was a really fascinating video.
Food ends up. We followed the trail to the Dominican Republic, where shop owners told us exactly where their inventory comes from. So now we're going inside of a store that's stocked with food that's paid for with your tax dollars.
Puedes explicar como me dijiste a mí, como tu familia, tú pones eso y luego lo mandan a usted o cómo es.
Eso ellos nos lo mandan para acá, en cajas.
Sí, pero usan los cupones estampillas de allá como me dijiste.
Sí.
Sí, sí, sí. Todo esto viene de Nueva York.
Todo lo que está aquí.
Why are we doing that? Why are we funding this? I suppose I do personally dislike these people who are doing this, but like the reason that it's profitable for these people to ship bags of rice and cans of oil and water, they're shipping water back to the Dominican Republic. And the only reason it's profitable is because they're getting it for free. They're paying $30 in the United States for a bag of rice, paying to have it shipped, and selling it in the Dominican Republic for $35. That's not like, it's not $30 to $35 off $5 profit. They have to pay to have it shipped, but they don't have to pay that $30. That's paid by us. There's people in the imaginations, I think, of the Census Bureau statisticians who are developing this projection. In 1975, they think Vincent P. Baraba, these people, they think 400,000 immigrants to the country every year, the majority of which will be white Europeans who will integrate and live here and be Americans, become Americans. And that's simply not what has happened in the last 50 years. We have 90 million people who need jobs and need housing, are receiving benefits. How much cheaper would a house be if we had 90 million fewer people? It's almost a third of our population in the United States. Imagine if 1 out of every 3 houses in the US, or apartments, or whatever, was empty. How cheap would it be? Obviously, there would be fewer houses. We would have fewer things. But you wouldn't be surrounded by strangers. We have 90 million people absorbing healthcare. We have 90 million people in the United States who would not have been here voting in our elections and bringing to Washington, D.C. just foreign parties. Why is there a Somalian in Congress? Ilhan Omar is a first-generation Somalian immigrant. And I don't... Yeah. This isn't... I should have gotten up some charts of other things that have gone wrong in the last 50 years. You know what I mean? Immigration is not the only problem we have, but it is a problem. It's a problem. We got off the gold standard, right? There's a lot of other things. I'm not saying it's the only thing, but it is a thing. I don't know. I've come to the end of my semi-prepared thoughts, but what can we do about this? We didn't want it. We didn't want it. There's more than we think. They're literally stealing from us. Somebody could go through and look and try and figure out how many Somalians are on benefits. We know that they're committing billions of dollars of fraud. Probably not only in Minnesota. There was a woman arrested in Grand Rapids in Michigan. I'm from Michigan. An African first-generation immigrant running daycare fraud, exactly like they were doing in Minnesota, in Somalia. Jesus. And I have to imagine that is happening in every little ethnic enclave in the United States. It's so strange. 50 years ago, how many Somalians were in fucking Minnesota? 0, right? It's got to be near 0. And instead, now they have an elected representative in Congress. And they're just siphoning money out of the United States. And the Dominicans sending it directly back to the Dominican Republic. They can only use SNAP to buy food, but they're buying that food and they're fucking sending it out of the country. They're not eating that rice. They don't need that rice to survive. What are the benefits for? Ah, God, I'm sorry. I'm ranting now. And that was not the point of this video. This was an extremely interesting video, though, and you should go and watch this, too. And I'll post a link to it. But in 1975, they imagined the United States, with roughly the same immigration, would cap out their population at like 270 million. And it would be like just based on fertility. And we've blown by it. We absolutely destroyed this projection by importing tens of millions of foreigners. And most people didn't want it. It hasn't been a net benefit to us. They've extracted our resources. Why is it happening? Who is doing it to us? I don't know. I guess this video is like, I wanted to show this because I thought it was really interesting. I did a bad job, I think, of detailing the actual report as much as I wanted to. And I started ranting at the end there, but the projections where they were close to what our fertility was, in reality, the population of the country is almost exactly 90 million less than it is now, right? And that's how many fucking people we've imported into our country. And I can't help but wonder how much of the decline of our country has been a result of things like this. And I guess that's it. That's all for now. This is still an hour-long video, which is significantly shorter than the last one I tried to make. Ideally, this is not the style of video I would like to make. I think I'll try and continue to make more. But this was reading this. I spent 3 hours just looking through this and reading it when I spotted it 3 days ago. And comparing the actual numbers to the projected numbers, I was really impressed with the quality of work by these people. These guys did great. Really fascinating, really intelligent, well done projections. With no accounting for the actual level of immigration that we experienced. And it's you can't help but wonder how different the country would be. And I guess that's all. Goodbye. Thank you. If you stuck around to watch, thank you very much. Really. Have a nice day.